Hello, and welcome to episode 526 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum, and with me, as always, is my co-host, historian and author, John Parshall. I got it right this time. I didn't screw it up. How are you, John?
I'm really good actually. I just about 10 minutes ago got comps for the cover design for my 1942 book, which is really cool and it makes you feel like, my God, this thing is actually going to be
Close.
real. It's becoming a real thing. So, yeah, that's pretty sweet. Anyway,
That's all. Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Getting
Getting
close to the
close.
finish line. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right, so we're going to pick up this week where we left off last week. It's not really a cliffhanger because, everybody knows
We
what
all know how it
happens.
comes out. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
the details, the devil
right.
is in the details, as they say. So, war came to the Americans on Wake Island early on December 8th, 1941. Japanese air raid that morning wiped out 8 of the 12 F-4F Wildcats on the ground and killed or wounded 60% of VMF 211's manpower. 1st Marine Defense Battalion fared somewhat better in terms of casualties, as did the civilians ashore, but their time too would come. Weathering days of successive air raids made Marine Major James Devereaux fully aware that a Japanese amphibious landing and operation to capture the American outpost would come all too soon. How soon he did not know, however. Until it came, all he and his Marines could do was wait and hope. Back in Pearl Harbor, steps were being taken to make the Marines' hope a reality. Relief efforts were being put into action involving reinforcement, an effort that would employ nearly everything in the Pacific Fleet's very depleted arsenal of ships. Back in the States, news of the Marines' defense against the seemingly unstoppable Japanese war machine registered on every newspaper in the country. Every American, young or old, man or woman, kept themselves pinned to the radios and newspapers as the heroic stand of the beleaguered Marines against the Japanese juggernaut played out in the latter days of December 41. On Wilkes, Peel, and Wake proper, the Marines, with the more than willing assistance of now over 400 civilian volunteers, dug in, prepared machine gun positions, and readied defenses for the expected Japanese invasion should it indeed come. And the marshals, Japanese Rear Admiral Kajioka, was licking his wounds and preparing another attack. He indeed would be back, and he wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. The Japanese would hit Wake, he planned, with an overwhelming force and would crush the Americans ashore with ease. Or would they? Dun, dun, dun. So we can talk about Japanese amphibious doctrine when we get to that point
Yeah,
because it's pretty interesting in the way they do things and how
and
the
it
sausage is made. We had the conversation somewhat with John McManus yesterday about Japanese amphibious doctrine. So
yes, sir.
it's a
Yeah, and
thing.
it pertains obviously to other actions that are going to be happening places like Corregidor a little
Mhm.
later on in 1942. So, yeah, absolutely. We got a
So
problem. Yeah, I mean the Americans are in the weeds here at this point and recognize that they are completely cut off.
yes,
Uh, Meanwhile, of course, back on the home front, there's a lot of fervent hope that maybe somehow this beleaguered garrison can hold out and that we can reinforce them sufficiently. But yeah, given the fact that Kitabutai is kind of running rampant around the Pacific at this point in time, that's going to make things kind of difficult.
yeah, and I pulled some headlines and things like that from
Yeah,
the American newspapers and magazines and whatnot. And I mean, you got to remember this is December 11th. This is four
right.
days, 4 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, when you get your back broken and here's a little bit of a brace, if you will, to help stand up. So the defense, the successful defense was, as I put in there, was exactly what the doctor ordered in terms of the American morale on the home front, because it gave the Americans some sort of hope that we could go toe to toe with these people who are seemingly running all over the Pacific and Asia, unstopped. Well, we
Yeah.
stopped them right here. So it was a big deal all the way up to the president of the United States,
Yes.
who made mention multiple times about the defense of Wake Island, including one he said, quote, "So as far as we know, and this is important, Wake Island is holding out. They have done a magnificent job. We're all very proud of that small group of Marines who are holding the island." I think the key phrase there is "so far as
Far
we
as we
know."
know.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
didn't.
Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got newspaper headlines that are screaming things like Wake still under the American flag. The Washington Post called Wake epic in American history, one of those gallant stands that stirred the soul. Newsweek declares out in the middle of the Pacific on tiny Wake Island, a Marine Corps garrison gave the Japanese the surprise of their lives. Fair enough. All America is watching to see what the next move of the heroic Leathernecks will be.
Yeah, it dominated everything. And I mean,
Yeah.
insofar as even, after we know what happens, Hollywood made a movie entitled Wake Island that was, I want to say it came out in 43 or
Yeah.
44.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a big thing, and they compared it a lot to the Revolutionary War, which
Mm-hmm.
I found to be kind of interesting, is that, the Marine stands, this small band of Marines on this little bitty atoll is standing up against the imperial monster,
Right.
if you will, of Japan. Same thing as they were doing in, 1770s. And
Yeah.
it was, as I put in the notes, the mood in the United States was festive, but on Wake Island, it was
Not,
not not
not
so
even,
festive, not even
yeah,
close.
not even remotely. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of, all the other litany of bad news that is coming in by December 11th. The Americans know at this point that the Prince of Wales and Repulse have been sunk off of Malaya. The Japanese have landed successfully in Malaya and are driving down that peninsula. The Battle of Jitra is going to happen very soon now, which is going to be a disaster for the British. American air power has been badly hurt in the Philippines, of course, and around this time too, I believe it's on the 10th that Cavite is heavily bombed by the Japanese, and that we lose all of our torpedoes there for the submarine force that's based in Manila. So yeah, things are really bad at this point. Hong Kong has been attacked as well. The Canadians have lost the gin drinker line by now, I believe, and are falling back to the city. So yeah, it's the beginning of a multi-month dumpster fire. Guam has already been captured.
Mm.
And yeah, so Wake is like one of the few sort of seemingly bright notes in this whole assemblage of disaster. But yeah, meanwhile, back on Wake itself, Devereaux and his men are facing up to a rather grimmer situation. One of
Very, very much so.
Yeah, yeah. They got a lot of bodies at this point that have been stored in a refrigerated area for a number of days at this point. And even though the successful defense of the island on the 11th, when
Yeah,
they, shoo the Japanese Navy away and sink two of these old destroyers in the process, we actually didn't lose any men during that defense,
which is astonishing, frankly.
which really is kind of astonishing when you think about it. But the bombing attacks up until that point have killed a number of people, and so by this time, Cunningham has ordered the dead to be buried for the fear of disease spreading. And so on the night of December 11th, they take one of Dan Teeter's steam shovels and they dig a trench in the sand about 100 yards from the eastern edge of the airfield. And they inter 80 military and civilian personnel in that makeshift grave and cover them over as quickly as possible, with the ceremony conducted by the civilian preacher John O'Neill.
And the crowd was sparse at the ceremony because people were in their positions. They were expecting an attack anytime soon. And we talked about it last week. They learned the lesson very hard. Cunningham did, specifically by not telling people that there was a war on and all these civilians got hurt and
Yeah,
killed in the Japanese bombing raid. Well, that no longer is the case. It's quite evident that there's a war on, number one. And number two, the civilians, for the most part, are taking cover where they can. And
yeah,
one of the terribly tragic things is that two of the people that were on Wake Island were a father and son team.
yeah,
And the son and I don't have the name, the son went to Wake to work with his dad because of the high wages that were being paid to civilian contractors. And the son is one of the young men that are killed in the bombing raid. And the father buries his son, who
yeah,
he tried to convince his son. It was like, you don't need to come out here. But the son's like, hey, I need the money. And
yeah,
it's terribly tragic. And there's going to be more of
yeah,
that.
yeah. You're not going to get over that. Yep.
Not at all. So, despite being way out in the middle of nowhere, Wake can receive and does consistently receive radio from San Francisco, California,
Hmm.
and it's picking up, whatever the radio shows are of the day, and it's picking up radio frequencies constantly from San Francisco. Um, the Marines here now learn that they've been dubbed the Alamo of the Pacific, which, as I put in the notes, some of the guys are like, cool, we're the Alamo of the Pacific. And then other guys are like, you do know what happened to the defenders of the Alamo, right? So,
that, that story didn't turn out real well. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's not a good
exactly.
harbinger of things to come, my friend.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Go on. Yeah,
there, there's another episode, the gallows humor of condemned men as it is. Kay Kaiser was a band leader of the day, pretty famous band leader of the day. And on his weekly radio show, he dedicated a song. I don't know what the damn song was, to the men of Wake Island, to the defenders of Wake Island. And the guys heard this, like they could hear it
yep,
on, on the radios, there on Wake Island. And one of the Marines, a guy named Max Dana, told Captain Platt, we're going to hear a lot about Wesley Platt today. He said, "Hey, Kay Kaiser dedicated a song in our honor," and Platt was this deadpan humor guy from South Carolina with this slow, deep Southern drawl that I can't even, imitate. And he said, "What did he play? Taps?" But goodness gracious. Hey, so
yep,
let's talk about these messages that are going back and forth because there's a famous message that,
yes,
supposedly was sent that was actually never sent. So one of the famous messages and one of the myths that's about Wake Islander is the message that we're going to get to here in a second that they needed more Japanese. So
right,
Cunningham is keeping an open line with Pearl Harbor, requesting literally everything under the sun because he knows he needs
sure,
everything yet. But let's
yep.
talk about this whole message flurry back and forth.
Yeah, the problem here is sort of a harbinger of the same kind of messaging that's going to trip Bill Halsey's trigger later on in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, in that you've got radio message men who are adding what you call padding to the front
Mhm.
and the rear end of these messages that are going back and forth to make it more difficult for the Japanese to try to decipher them if they've actually broken into the code system at all. And so on the morning of the 11th at 0845, this message goes out that, quote, send us, stop. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party, Cunningham, more Japs. And, by hook or by crook, somehow this padding gets rearranged. And when it's received then in Pearl Harbor, the message is translated to just be send us more Japs, which
Mhm.
is actually absolutely the last thing that Devereaux needed. And when and he never said those words.
Right.
Cunningham likewise never said those words, but it becomes this sort of instant urban fable, if you will, that the Marines are all snorting and fire breathing, having beaten off this attack on the 11th, and here they are heroically saying, "Send us more Japs." And actually, when Devereaux specifically hears this message broadcast across the country via radio, he is appalled because that is absolutely the last thing that he needs at this point.
Yeah. And the thing, and they attributed it. I'll try it again. Attributed the message to Devereaux.
Right?
And the key thing is that he never sent any messages to Pearl Harbor whatsoever because he
Yeah,
wasn't the island commander. It was Cunningham.
Cunningham's.
Cunningham was the one that sent everything back and forth.
Yeah,
And he dang sure didn't say anything like that. And exactly to your point, Devereaux, when he hears this, he's like, "Hey, I never said that." And
yeah,
B, no, we don't need any more. We got plenty on
plenty.
our
Yeah,
own. And there's cartoons. There's like political cartoons and patriotic cartoons, I guess is a more appropriate term of these, big muscle-bound Marine with the pie pan helmet and the, torn up sleeves and everything, standing there with a bubble or, a thought bubble saying, send us more Japs and all this other stuff. And it was a real thing, but
that was a
yeah,
thing.
They
Yeah.
did not. They did not need that at all.
No.
So let's talk about the relief effort. And this was
Yeah.
a thing. This was a definitely a real thing. Husband Kimmel at this point is still
Yep.
in command of the Pacific Fleet, even though he is probably keenly aware that he's going to be relieved at any moment.
Yep.
Um, he decides, and we talked about this last week, is that, Wake had been, he wanted Wake to be kind of dangled as a piece of bait to bring the Japanese fleet out, so the American fleet could engage them in a
Potentially fight
battle. And
a fleet
right,
action there. Right.
right.
Yeah. That was the pre-war plan. The post-war plan, of course, is looking a little bit different at this point, considering your battle line is now lying on the mud or worse. But nevertheless, he is going to try to get some additional reinforcements out to that island, and also, if possible, pull the civilians
Yes.
off of the atoll as well. And so, to that end, they're going to use the seaplane tender Tangier. They're going to load that puppy up with as much in the way of supplies and manpower as they can, and they're going to bring it out there. And then they do the calculations to figure out that if the civilians basically bring nothing with them, nothing more than a toothbrush, they
Yeah.
should be able to pull all of the civilians off and cram them onto Tangier and get them back to Hawaii. So Saratoga is going to be the carrier that's going to be covering this expedition. And so to that end, they're pulling together this task force. And then on December 12th, they load up 200 Marines of the 4th Defense Battalion onto the Tangier, and they unload her avgas in order to make room for more supplies. She's going to have 9,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition, 12,000 rounds of 3-inch, 3 million rounds of belted 30 cal, and crates of hand grenades, barbed wire mines, 1911s, and parts for Wake's damaged shore batteries and AA guns. So if they could have gotten this in here, the eye opener for me is uh, 3 million rounds worth of 30 cal. That's what you need, Jack. Is a lot more infantry firepower out there. Would have been nice to have some mortars too. Frankly, they don't have any sort of indirect.
No,
Um,
not a lick. Not a lick.
yeah,
And the fact that they're bringing that much stuff, I mean, that's a
yep,
lot. 9,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition,
yep,
12,000 of three, and then the 3 million 30 cal. And one would assume that there's 50 in there too, but that's all I could find. But
yeah,
regardless of this, they're not planning on leaving anytime soon.
right,
Like you said, they want to get the civies out, and
yep.
and rightfully so. But they're not planning to leave that island. The Marines are going to hold that island. At least that's the plan, and they're going to
Although,
sit tight.
one of the things I note though is they're only bringing in 200 additional Marines,
Mhm.
and if you talk about taking all those civilians out, you are markedly decreasing the manpower that is on that island. Granted that the civilians are not combatants, but they are the manpower that you are using to improve your fortifications, clean up damage to installations that are being inflicted by the near daily bombing raids that are now coming over.
Yes.
So, to me, 200 Marines, that's not a huge additional commitment. I want a battalion. That's what I want to see. I want to, but they don't have.
Yeah, and that's the key is
Yeah,
that they got to do this and they got to do this like right now, and or Kimmel does. He wants to do this right now, and he can only we've said it 100 times. You can only use what you got on
yeah,
hand, and that's all that's there at that moment because this
yeah.
is the 12th, 5 days after Pearl Harbor. First Marine Division
Right.
is not a thing,
Yep.
and that's it. That's all there
And
is
you're
right
you're
there.
certainly not going to pull any army guys off
No,
of Oahu at this point because the threat of invasion of that place, in the pantheon of disposability, Oahu is like number one with a bullet of we cannot lose this. It's
right.
right up there with, the Panama Canal. So we're not going to be, deteriorating or degrading the defenses on Oahu in order to try to, relieve this garrison that's out in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere at Wake.
Sending a 24th ID out there was never in the plans.
No.
It was
Yeah.
never gonna happen. Another element of defense or offense, however you want to look at it, was also going to be VMF 221,
Hmm.
VMF 221. They're going to be aboard Saratoga, and they are aboard Saratoga with their F2A Brewster Buffaloes because that's all they
EAT.
had. That's
Yep.
all they had. They were going to do similar to what 211 did is, when they get off a certain amount of distance, they're going to launch the Brewsters out there and they're going to land and they're going to, I wouldn't even say reinforce 211 because 211 has almost ceased to exist by this point. They're going to
Yep.
take their place
Yep.
and you're going to have more fighters on wake. Brewsters or not, at least they can fly. So,
Yep.
I mean, but all this symbolizes to me that Kimmel was like, he's dead set on we're going to hold this sucker at least for a while
Yeah.
to draw out the Japanese fleet so we can engage them because it's not just Saratoga that's part of these plans, it's also Lexington and Enterprise too.
Yep.
Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, so he's using those two carriers to try to stir up trouble in other
Yes.
locales, so that hopefully then Sarah and Tangier, which is old and slow, are going to have the wiggle room that they need to actually get into Wake and out of Wake, because of course it's going to take to Tangier the better part of 2 days to
Yeah.
offload all this stuff and then onload the civilians and then get the heck out of Dodge. So while Saratoga and Tangier are doing their thing, Task Force 11 under Vice Admiral Wilson Brown, which is Lexington, is going to be leaving Pearl Harbor and is going to go to Jalowit and raid in the Marshalls. Brown will hit Jalowit and then try to hightail it back to Pearl. Meanwhile, the Big E under Halsey is going to be out at sea acting as a potential reinforcement should the Japanese arrive to do battle. But Fletcher is now under orders in Saratoga to arrive off of Wake by 23 December and get Tangier to the atoll by Christmas Eve, and then hopefully load up and go and be out of there by 26 December.
Yeah. The, Tangier, I looked it up right before we started this. Tangier could do 18 knots,
Yeah,
like downhill. She could do 18 knots, and then which is not
that's okay.
terribly. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay. But the slow gal is really all Kimmel has at that point is the Euler Neches.
yeah.
He saddles Saratoga with the Euler because it's all that was available at that, I guess, all available right there for that operation specifically.
Which I'm also intrigued by, and I wish I could channel my inner Sal Mercogliano. Where the heck is the Neo show? Because that was a faster vessel and a bigger oiler as well.
She
But
I, she
she's
may have been with one of
probably
the other carriers. I don't
that's
know.
probably yeah, that's my guess there. Anyway,
Yeah, but Neches, the whole point of this is she could do 12 knots.
right.
That's it. And
Yeah,
that's what breaking out the friggin' oars, and she's going to, as they say, any task force or convoy, whatever the case may be, can only go as fast as the slowest ship.
there you are.
Well, Saratoga could fly. I mean, she could do
Yeah,
30 knots easy.
easy.
And you saddle a couple of DDs with her and a couple of crew, or even hell, get rid of the destroyers and just take her cruisers. She could have made it there in rapid amount of time. Of course, she
Yeah,
wouldn't have the fuel to get back. But the Neches is going to be the one that's going to slow everything
everything
down.
down. That's exactly right. So on 15 December, the expedition makes ready to sail the Tangier. The Neches, four destroyers, sail at 17:30 on the 15th. And of course, it's a day later across the date line at Wake. Saratoga and the remainder of the escort are delayed by the time it takes to fuel the carrier. So they don't
Mhm.
leave until the following day, but of course, they can catch up to
Right.
Neches relatively easily.
Easy.
The Twilight Sortie, we have a remembrance here from First Lieutenant Robert D. Heinel, was the commander of Battery F, who is one of the Marines who is on board the Tangier. In any case, he writes that once they get beyond Oahu, suddenly we seem to be in very lonely waters indeed. Columbus's men sailing westward in hourly apprehension of toppling off the edge of a square earth could not have felt the seas to be more inscrutable and less friendly. That's a great quote.
It is.
Yeah.
That is a good quote. But you can
Yeah.
imagine that was, the feeling, is these
Yeah,
guys know that, the boogeyman's out there and they got to go, these Marines
deal with.
specifically, they got
Yep.
to go deal with the boogeyman, and there's no guarantee that they're going to survive said
Yeah.
confrontation with the boogeyman. So,
Yeah, because of course the Americans at this point have very little idea of where the Japanese carrier task force that raided Pearl Harbor. I
right.
mean, they just vanished. We never
Yeah.
saw them. We never sighted them with any of our scouting assets. They, you know, it's like they had a teleporter or something, and they were just
Yes.
out of there. So yeah, nobody knows where they are.
We'll talk about that in a
Mean,
minute.
yeah. Meanwhile, back in the Marshall Islands, the Japanese are keeping the pressure up on Wake all through this time because they have the advantage that Wake is basically sitting within the air envelope of all of their ground based assets that are in the Marshall Islands. So on the 12th, there is sort of a nuisance raid by a Japanese flying boat that bombs the edge of the lagoon. They actually shoot down this Mavis, and that was done by one of the F4Fs. We've at this point got a grand total of two Wildcats that are still flyable on Wake Island at this point. Later that afternoon, 26 Nells bomb Wake yet again. Wake's gunners shoot down one Nell and damaged four more, but not in any way severely.
They keep it up almost every day, and
Yep.
sometimes most days it's multiple times a day. The Mavises, which I kind of found interesting, I didn't know that that was a thing, that
Yeah.
Japanese flying boats conducted bombing operations, but apparently they did because they did
Yeah,
it damn
they've
near
got
every
hard
day.
points under their wings and they can carry, not a big bomb load, but you can put some 100 pounders under there and that kind of thing. So, yeah,
Yeah, they hit them again on the 14th. The Nels come back again that same day, 30 of them this time.
30.
And they set one of the F4Fs afire, although the plane is salvaged and it is flyable.
So we
On the
still have two.
We still got two, but
Got
that
two.
that that's not going to last either.
Yeah.
On the 15th, four more Mavises hit Camp One, although nothing is damaged. The following day, another 33 come back and hit Wake again, and from then on, it's almost every single day.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Vice Admiral Inoue and Kajioka because
Yeah.
the defeat, which is what it was, is not sitting well with Inoue
New.
specifically.
No, and it's kind of intriguing too because so the admiral that's in charge out here, Inoue Shigeyoshi, is the commander of the Fourth Fleet, and Inoue is one of the most antagonistic of the pro air power admirals within the Japanese Navy. And Fourth Fleet is not a plum assignment.
Mhm.
They basically put Inoue out here because they just didn't want to have to listen to him anymore. And so, but it's intriguing because then Inoue is going to end up being in charge of a number of fairly important operations. He'll be running the capture of the eventual capture of Wake, spoiler alert, and also be in charge of the Battle of Coral Sea. Um, but yeah, obviously, what happened on the 11th is not a good look at all, losing two destroyers and several hundred men. And so when Kajioka comes back, they decide to try to beef his force up at least somewhat. So they're adding two more patrol boats to this force, and these are patrol boats number 32 and 33. These are old Momi class destroyers, which were built that they're the contemporaries of our four stackers, built
Mhm.
right around World War One. These were vessels that were commissioned, 1918, 1920. Um, by this time, they are no longer seen as frontline units, but they're pretty heavily armed and they're fast. And so they're going to be using these things eventually as sort of fast destroyer transports to bring more elements of the landing force along with them. And so, to that end, instead of trying to take this place with 450 SNLF, now there's going to be a first wave force that's going to have 900 Rika Sentai and then an additional 1,100 sailors if need be. Likewise, they are now attaching the units of Cruiser Division 6. This is the oldest cruiser division in the Imperial Navy. So this is heavy cruisers Aoba, Furataka, Kinagasa, and Kako. And again, just like we had sort of prelude to the Battle of Savo Island, where we had those old light cruisers, Tenryu, Tatsuda, and
Mhm.
Yubari, are all going to be at Savo Island. This quartet of heavy cruisers, likewise, is going to be at Savo Island as well. So I just that's just kind of eerie for me. And again, this is not the A team. These are the oldest heavy cruisers in the Japanese inventory. These things have only got 6 8-inch guns apiece. So pretty underarmed for what you would consider to be a heavy cruiser, but nevertheless, in terms of heavy gun power that they can now bring to bear on Wake, this is a pretty significant upgrade to Kajioka's force. So Inoue now instructs Kajioka that you are to capture the island by 26 December, if not before. And so Kajioka now leaves the marshals. He's going to sortie again on the 21st and plans to land on Wake on the 23rd,
Mhm.
which gets us
He,
into their doctrine,
yeah, I
right?
was gonna say he plans to. So we were kind of kicking it back and forth last time as to whether or not he was landing in the daylight,
Yeah.
theoretically, had he not been brushed away on the 11th. And it's totally he would have, because as we said, Yabari opens fire at like 05:30 or something.
Mhm.
Right just before sunrise. Actually, the sun is rising, so
Yeah.
there's no question that those
It
Rico
was going to be
Sentai
a
would have
daylight
landed
operation.
in the daylight. Well, that ain't happening now,
No.
because I don't know if Inoue said, "Look, doofus, this is how you need to do this," or what, or
Yeah.
if Kajioka just had an epiphany and was like, "Hey, you know what? This goes completely against our doctrine, landing people in broad daylight on a beach,
Right.
on a defended beach. So maybe we should try
And
what we're supposed to do."
right. And that is their doctrine in a nutshell, is to land on undefended beaches at night. Because in the defense of Japanese infantry, once they do get ashore in a place, they are going to be very, very difficult to push off. We all
Right.
understand how obdurate Japanese infantry are on the defense, and so they understand that all they need to do here is get a toehold, and they should be able to then, overpower us once they have sufficient force on the ground. But the key is how to get that toehold. And so the plan now is that they are going to be landing these forces after dark. And not only that, they're going to be using these two new patrol boats, which are actually very old vessels, in a similar way to some of the commando raids that the Allies
Mhm.
pull off against
Yep.
France. They take an old destroyer, they load it up with commandos, and just so they're gonna take these two patrol boats and they're just gonna run these puppies up on the South Beach and disgorge this first wave full of SNLF troops. That's the plan. The other key component, of course, in terms of degrading the air power on Wake Island, is that they cut orders to basically they're calling an audible here with Kita Butai, and they cut orders to Carrier Division 2, which is Hiryu and Soryu, that instead of going straight back to the home islands with the rest of Kita Butai, you guys are going to come down here and lend support to the actual operation. So instead of periodic bombing runs by Nels, if we've got two carriers here, we can now put a constant air blanket over Wake while this amphibious operation is going on. And so Hiryu and Soryu are going to be showing up in the relatively near future.
On the 21st of December is when
Yeah.
when their aircraft show up over Wake. And like I put in the notes, the Marines were not stupid. They'd grown accustomed to seeing the twin-tailed Nels
Yep.
and the big goofy looking Mavis, aircraft. They'd grown accustomed to that. They had yet to see a single seat fighter that wasn't their own. They'd
Yep.
yet to see a Val or a Kate or anything like that.
Yep.
So when these very same aircraft, Kates and Vals and A6Ms
Zeros.
appear over Wake Island on the 21st of December, they know what that is. The
Yeah.
civilians probably don't, but the Marines do. They know that those are carrier aircraft, which means that the big boys are out there somewhere and they got to be pretty damn close. So
Yep.
we're probably going to be hit pretty dang soon.
Yep. Yeah, they have to be within roughly 200 miles of the atoll at this point. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
So once these guys, and we can, well, let's not get too far ahead, but we'll talk about this because this has a drastic effect on the relief operation. Is the
yep,
presence of these at the very least, as far as the Navy knows, one carrier, if not more,
right,
and we can get to that in a minute. So on the 17th of December, Wake's relief efforts suffered, as I put in the notes, a major hit because that is the date that Admiral Husband Kimmel is relieved of command of the Pacific Fleet. And as you will recall, just briefly a minute ago, we said that he was the guy that initiated this relief slash potential trap mission, if you will, to wrangle in the Japanese and also get the civilians out and get the
yeah,
Marines ashore. Well, with Kimmel gone, there's no guarantee that that plan is going to survive the night, which, but as we see, it does until, of course, it doesn't. Admiral Pye, William Pye,
yep,
Vice Admiral William Pye is the guy that takes over CINCPAC as CINCPAC until Nimitz comes. It was a known thing that he was only a,
yeah,
interim head coach, if you will, until
right.
the new guy comes aboard.
Yeah, Nimitz is on a train at this point,
Yes,
going across
in
the U.S.
Chicago somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, with his aide, yeah, trying to get out to San Fran. Anyway,
On the 18th of December, Pye receives intelligence well, he was an admiral later, Edwin Layton, that suggested that Yurkito Butai is roaming the seas somewhere out there. And he had no idea where. Layton said that there was only four carriers, as we know. Of course, there were six. He said that the majority of Kido Butai is going to head home, but there may be one, two, or maybe even four. We don't know. Frankly, he has no clue. He
right,
just knows that somewhere out there there is a carrier, at least one of the Japanese carriers that raided Pearl Harbor, and then by the 21st, which is 3 days later, they get word that, oh yeah, by the way, Wake has been hit by carrier aircraft. So all
right.
this starts to formulate in Pye's head, and Pye, who is, no offense to the man, was significantly less aggressive than Husband
Yes,
Kimmel.
yes, he was.
He starts to think
Sarah,
maybe we're going to sail into a trap here.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And honestly, I don't want to fight a carrier battle against Hiryu and Soryu. Those are the two best carriers in their navy, and Saratoga has cranky elevators just like the Lexington
Mhm.
does. One carrier versus two, that does not smell good. So one of the things that's kind of biting us in the butt here is that we don't understand how to concentrate carriers at this point in
No.
the war. All of our carriers, we got three flight decks operating at this point, and they're all widely dispersed. So nobody's really in a position to back up the Saratoga at this point. And yeah, if she's facing up to she's trying to do two things simultaneously.
Yes.
She's got to run escort on the Tangier, which is very valuable, and then I'm in a position where I may have to fight a carrier battle too, and I've only got one flight deck. That doesn't smell good.
And you said that she'd be on her own, and you're 100% right because if you actually look at Kimmel's plan, and he sends Enterprise out there to act as a
A
backup,
backstop. Yeah,
yeah, and Lex is going to go raid at Jalowitz. They're none of them are within range to where they could get to Saratoga quickly. It's not like
yeah,
Enterprise is only 80 miles behind or anything. She's like 250, 300 miles away. So
right,
she's not going to get there right now. By the time she got there, if there was a sea battle, Saratoga might be under the waves at that
right,
point. And, so I mean, it was a bad plan to begin with, frankly. Not that it was not done with the right intentions.
right,
It was
right.
just poorly thought out, frankly.
Yeah, if you're going to go up there, you need to take all your carriers with you.
Yes.
That's really what it comes down to. To
Yeah.
me, as I was thinking about this just this morning, there are eerie parallels here to the Battle of Midway, but in reverse. In that, um, posit that the Japanese have managed to capture Midway Island, they are now in a position where they are under our land-based air envelope from Oahu. We could have bombed them with impunity with B-17s based on Oahu. And yet, the distance from Midway to Wake is something on the order of 1,200 nautical miles. And so we're sticking our necks out. We are under the air envelope of the Marshall Islands. This is a bad place for us to try to fight a carrier battle because, of course, all of those Nells that we as
Yeah,
Americans tend to look at as, well, those are bombers. No, dude, those were originally built as torpedo planes. That is their original design concept. And so all of those Nells that are busily bombing Wake now potentially could become involved in a carrier battle, and go after our flight decks. So this is a very disadvantageous place for us to be fighting a carrier battle. The other problem is scouting assets.
right.
The Japanese have got all these flying boats, Mavises, that have
We
got
got nothing.
range galore. And a lot of people don't appreciate that during the actual Battle of Midway. I think one of our biggest advantages is our preponderance of scouting assets. We got PBYs out the yin yang that are
Right.
sitting on Midway, and that gives us the ability to multiply the firepower that are on our carriers because our carriers, in many cases, are not having to do their own scouting. They're relying on PBYs. The exact situation in reverse pertains to Wake, in that the Japanese will have an advantage in scouting assets in comparison to a single flight deck like Saratoga. So this is not a good place to fight a carrier battle, in my opinion, unless you are willing to bring all three of your flight decks out to the party, and that is not what the original plan here was.
And there's two guys that want to tangle with the Japanese. One of them's Frank Jack Fletcher, and the other one's Bill Halsey. And nothing against Wilson Brown, but to that end, his Lexington task force is part of this operation. As you said earlier, supposed to raid Jalowit and basically be like, "Hey, I'm over here," kind of a thing. Well,
Right,
on his way to Jalowit, they conduct gunnery practice, and which is a common thing, obviously. And it is discovered not just aboard Lexington, but aboard the vast majority of the ships in the task force, the 5-inch shells that were aboard those ships that had just been loaded up in Pearl are defective,
right.
and they don't go kaboom when they're supposed to go kaboom. So, in other words, they don't have much very little, if
Triple A.
any,
Yeah,
AAA umbrella. All they
yeah,
have is what the fighters that are aboard Lexington to deal with any kind of air assets that the Japanese may throw, which they know they have a
yeah.
lot of them in the Marshall. So Brown is like,
No me gusta.
I'm out, brother. I'm not
Yeah,
hitting Jallo. And he pulls, and it's in his orders. He can call an audible if he
yeah,
chooses to do so, and he does. And he
yeah,
decides to raid Macon, which, of course, as we know, doesn't happen anyway because he winds up getting pulled back to Pearl Harbor regardless.
yeah.
So it's a
It's shaping
mess.
up. Yeah, this thing is just kind of snake bit from the beginning, is kind of what it comes down to. So,
It's
in
almost
any
like it was, again, the intentions were good.
yeah,
Obviously the intentions are good, but it's almost like he just took everything and just threw it in a pile and said, "Here, go, just take it all," and didn't really think things through. And I mean, whatever.
yeah,
I kind of understand. So regardless of this, Saratoga is still going. She's still going out there. She doesn't know any of this crap's going down. Fletcher has no idea that any of this is happening. On the
yeah.
20th of December, 21 December, wake time, despite the fact that Natchez is, the
Dog
albatross
slow.
that's dragging
Yeah,
everything down. Fletcher had actually reached the halfway point of his mission. He was now 725 miles away from Wake.
yeah.
And at this point, things start to go sideways for him too. As I put in the notes, Pi specifically restricted the sailing areas of Lexington and Enterprise, keeping them far away because he was afraid to get them sunk, leaving Saratoga on her own. She's all alone
Right.
at this point, so it's not going to happen. Um, Fletcher gets word too that carrier aircraft on the 21st have indeed raided Wake Island. So he knows, he's like, okay, there's got to be a Japanese carrier out here somewhere. They don't have any clue as to where they are. So he
Hmm.
takes his force and moves them northwest to steer clear of any kind of aerial umbrella that he might encounter because he's got to refuel his specifically his destroyers going
Yeah,
out there, and it's delaying the arrival of Tangier and Saratoga altogether. Um, the intel from Leighton continues to come in, and Leighton says at this point now there may be as many as 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in the vicinity. And Pi sends Fletcher a message, quote, to be prepared for possibility of enemy forces your vicinity. That's all he says. Doesn't say anything else.
yeah,
What the hell is that supposed to? Is that a
yeah.
rowboat
That's
or is that
yeah,
Kidobutai? What is that?
right. Exactly. No, that's not very actionable intel. So. Yeah, not good at this point. They're even contemplating detaching uh, the Tangier at this point to just do its own solo run into, yeah, 225 or more miles, probably better part of 500 miles without any air cover whatsoever. There
Yeah.
is no way that this ship is going to survive in that threat environment. That's not a realistic thing. So yeah, in any case, the rescue mission is not looking good here. By the time you get to the 22nd or so, the tea leaves are reading very, very badly.
When Fletcher gets, because Pye says he orders, well, essentially orders Fletcher to detach Tangier and let her go on her own. And when Fletcher reads these, he's like, "What?"
Yeah,
He's like, "You got to be kidding! This thing would never make it."
no
And
way.
and he has serious reservations. Apparently, according to Lundstrom, Fletcher has serious reservations about turning this thing loose because he knows it's gonna get sunk
Yeah,
if it gets found. If it gets found, it's gonna be sunk, and every single one of those people and all those supplies are gonna die
yeah,
because there's not gonna be anybody around them. They were gonna detach two DDs to go along with
right,
Tangier as a escort,
right,
probably just to pick up the survivors.
right.
And that was
Like,
it. And to the credit of the captain of the Tangier, and I don't remember his name right now off the top of my head, he was willing to do it. He's like, you know what? Screw it. I'll do it. Let's go. I'll run this damn thing ashore if I have to, but I'm going to get
right.
these Marines on that beach and get these people that ammunition. So the heart was there. It's just the planning. The planning was not. All right. So on December the 20th, we're drawing ever nearer to the end here. A PBY piloted by Ensign J.J. Murphy and Howard 80. And as I put in the notes, yes, that Howard 80, same guy that finds Kido Butai at Midway,
Yep.
plops down in Wake Island's lagoon. Their job there is twofold. One, it's to assess the situation. Two, to get any kind of sensitive documents and things like that out, which is also a bad sign, frankly.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, it's as I said, to assess the situation because although we know Cunningham is sending messages back and forth, and he is, and he's really all he's doing, and I can't fault the man for it, is he's asking, he's like, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, I need this, that, and five of these. He's not letting, anybody know that, the power station's destroyed and this is destroyed and da da
Which
da 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 da.
I just find incredible because, yeah, there needed to have been more adult supervision here in terms of what was being sent back to Pearl Harbor in terms of this is what is going on in this installation.
Yeah.
Because we're letting two ensigns, you are the guys that are in charge of making, the assessment of what the heck is going on. And
Yes.
Howard 80 doesn't have any ability to make an intelligent report on what has happened on this island. And so to me, it is just ludicrous that you didn't at least put one Marine officer, a
Totally.
ground pounder, to come in, get off the freaking plane, talk to Cunningham, and say, what's happened here? Instead, you send these two greenhorns out in a PBY to pick up the mail, do a sketch of,
That's it.
it's just this is
I
not
don't
how grown-ups run a war. It just makes
I
no
don't get
sense
it
to me.
either. And that's
Okay.
why I said when we were talking about FDR earlier and I said the key phrase was as far as we know. The
Yeah,
President of the United States
doesn't
did not
know.
know what the
Yeah,
hell was going on Wake Island, aside from the fact that the Marines had fended off a Japanese invasion. That's all the
right.
man knew. And if
Yeah,
the boss doesn't know what's going on, that's a problem.
that's a
And
problem.
and
I,
to
I
your
have to.
point, yeah.
I'm pointing the finger at Cunningham on this one. I'm
Well,
he's
Pie
got to
too,
be.
though. Pie too,
Yeah,
though. So I
yeah,
mean, he could have said, hey, Colonel so and so, get on that bird and go, and I want a
yeah.
report from you. He does
Right,
not do that. None of
right.
those guys do that.
Yeah, because
And
we could do some real-time history as to how old Howard 80 is at this point, but he's probably 23 years old or some damn thing, maybe 26. Yeah, he can't send.
regardless of that, he's
Yeah,
that's not his job. He's a
right. He's a
PPY pilot for
yeah,
crying out
exactly.
loud.
What do you know about ground pounders and any sort of infantry combat? Anyway, yeah. So,
Exactly.
oops, that's a
Yeah.
fail.
So he gets there, they get there, and they no kidding. When he gets out, and I'm not sure if it's Murphy or 80, I don't know which one, it doesn't matter. They ask the first Marine that they see, swear to God, where is the Pan American Hotel? That's how out of touch, and it's not
Yeah.
these guys' fault. They don't know any better, but that's how out of touch Pearl Harbor was with the actual situation. And the Marine is like, "Are you
Are you
high?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What?
Right.
It's over there. See that pile of rubble? That's it over there. Have fun."
Yeah.
And they go over there, and they're surrounded, literally surrounded by the destruction, and they're dutifully taking notes on all this stuff.
Right.
And they go meet with Cunningham, and they tell Cunningham, "A, give me all your mail, give me all your reports, all your stuff."
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, there is a relief force coming, and they're due to get here by Christmas Eve. Um, this information, spreads across the islands like the flu. you know,
Hmm.
Instantly makes, everybody's sagging morale, lift that, oh, hey, the Navy is indeed coming.
At least
They're
trying.
they're
Yeah.
trying. Yeah, they're
Yep.
coming in for all they know that they are, just over the horizon, if you will. Um, but one of the things, I always like to touch on the human aspects. This is the first time and the last time that mail would come in or go out
Yeah.
of Wake Island during the entirety of the siege. Um, our boy Hammer and Hank Elrod sends a letter to his wife, closes it with, quote, "I am missing you terribly. I'll think of a million things that I should have said after I have gone to bed tonight, but now I'm going to say that I love you and you alone always and always." Of course, we know what happens to Hammer and Hank. So the next morning, the PBY goes, she goes back. Murphy is the one that actually does deliver the report to Pi in person, tells him that there's only two flyable aircraft left on the island. Half of VMF 211, actually, it's more than that, are
Is
dead. And as he says, Wake Island is a shambles. And
right.
this is the first eyewitness report since the civilians leave on the 8th, someone in,
Yeah.
in the Clipper, that
Yep.
anybody's heard anything from Wake, that's literally seen it with their own eyes. And this is so
Okay.
so Pi is, and we're gonna see he's like a pancake. He's flipping and flopping. He's going from one side to the next. Once he gets Murphy's report of how really bad the situation is on Wake, he decides to double down and risk Saratoga if need be to get these men and supplies to Wake Island itself. So at this point, instead of telling Fletcher to send Tangier on what amounted to be a death ride with
Right.
no air cover, he tells Fletch to give Tangier air cover, which I think Fletcher probably would have done regardless,
Regardless.
honestly.
Yeah.
But he says, now you're under orders. You get these people as close as you possibly can. Keep Saratoga about, 200-ish miles away, but provide as much air cover as you can. Launch VMF 221 at dawn. And Pi's issuing orders to the task force commander to do all this.
Yeah.
That same day to search for Kido Butai, which what 221 would have done aside from say, here they are, is about the only thing they would have done.
Yes.
Um, because they're not, good God, would you want to get in an air battle over Kido Butai with F2As? No, thank
No.
you.
No,
No,
thank
thank
you.
you. Um, this is all happening on the 21st of December. Fletcher is still in line to arrive, well, to have Tangier arrive off of Wake's coast by Christmas Eve. That's
Right.
still, like, the timeline is still laying that out on the 21st of December. As I said, this PBY with 80, it leaves Wake's last two F4Fs, take to the air. They're piloted. One of them's piloted by a gentleman named Lieutenant Davidson. He gets shot down, or actually just goes missing.
Missing.
So we,
Yeah.
we don't know what happened to him. There's only one F4F now. It's piloted by Captain Freuler. He shoots down a Japanese Zero, which is confirmed, but he's jumped by another aircraft. Obviously, this is going to be Kido Butai because he's jumping. He's fighting
Yeah.
carrier aircraft. Somebody shoots him up pretty good. The aircraft lands on Wake, and it's shot up so bad it's never good. It's not even a hangar queen. It's never going to fly again.
Yeah.
Wake now has no
No air
air
cover.
cover, none
That's right.
at all, none at all.
Yeah. Meanwhile, of course, Kajioka is coming. and
Yes, he is.
he is going to be relying he is going to be relying basically on surprise and brute force to take this island the second time around. So he is, as we said, he's going to be landing at just before dawn in three waves. The first wave of 700 soldiers is going to land via patrol boats. Those two patrol boats, 32 and 33, and they're going to purposely ground themselves on the southern beaches of Wake Island. And basically, at that point, the guys are just going to, I don't want to say jump off, but get
Well,
off as
yeah,
rapidly as
kind of.
possible. They will then assault the airfield, sweep the resistance aside at the airfield, and then head inland. Meanwhile, another 200 troops are going to be coming in via small landing craft near Camp 1 at the western tip of Wake and in the middle of Wilkes Island. Once they've got a beachhead established there, the second echelon of 1,100 soldiers is going to land on the island and then finish off the defenders. They're going to use a bombardment by two of the cruisers, will occur at Peel Island so as to draw attention there. And if all else fails, he intends to run his other destroyers aground and have their crews fight as infantry. So, yeah, Kajioka at this point does not want to be seen as insufficiently aggressive. It gives you a sense for just how little esteem they put in those older destroyers. I kind of get the two patrol boats. I mean, these are pretty
Sure.
old destroyers, but some of the others in the inventory are old but not that old, and you're willing to lose six or seven of them
Yeah.
apparently. You know, anyway. Um, Meanwhile, on the Marine side of things, Devereaux has his men spread out, but they're spread very, very thin. There just aren't that many people to cover this island. He also predicts that the Japanese are going to try to land on the southern beaches, and so that's where he's got the
Sure.
majority of his beef. And he is also though putting another group of people at Wilkes Island because he assumes that their southern beach on that island as well will be the target. So Platt is out on Wilkes Island. He's got 70 men there that are mostly clustered around the 5-inch and 3-inch batteries. Makes good enough sense. They got 450 cals guarding the beach, and two more automatic weapons are around the North Shore. Around 0200, they
Mhm.
begin noticing gun flashes out at sea. And intriguingly, the Japanese are using their cruisers. They are shooting what they think is Wilkes Island, but actually is not Wilkes Island. It's wave
Right.
tops. And that premature bombardment gives away the presence of the Japanese landing force to the Americans, so they now know that they are coming.
Yeah. At 0230, machine gun fire is heard on Wilkes Island or in
Yep.
the direction of Wilkes Island. And at 0250, Cunningham sends a radio to the commandant of the 14th Naval District, which is Claude Block, and he says, quote, island under gunfire, enemy apparently landing. And I
Yeah.
said, apparently landing. And again, because this is the bugaboo of the Americans on Wake, the greater Royal Wake, is communications suck.
Yeah.
And they do. And I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about this last week, is that they're communications by phone and the wires are exposed.
Yeah.
So any kind of shell fire, any kind of Japanese with a bayonet can cut those wires, and then you're out.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
it's going to be a bad situation. So indeed, the Japanese are landing, and they do land on Wilkes. And just so everybody understands, a lot of this stuff happens simultaneously, but in order to kind of keep everything in one cohesion,
Narratively.
yeah, we're going to focus on each island individually. So we're going to focus on Wilkes first. On Wilkes Island, there was a Marine gunner named last name McKinstry. He contacted Captain Platt and told him he was sure that something was in the surf. Well, Platt tells him immediately, "Well, shoot it."
Right.
And when he does so, he doesn't see anything, and it is pitch black out there. And these
Yep.
guys, neither the Japanese nor the Marines, can see squat. They can see nothing.
Yep.
What the Marines do have are searchlights, and Platt orders one of the searchlights to kick on, and when they do, it just happens to sweep across a section of the beach where there is a Japanese landing craft, and there's about 100 or so guys jumping out of this landing craft in the middle of the pitch black darkness, running towards McKinstry's 3-inch gun. Um, they
They
wind up getting
shoot this,
good.
yeah, they shoot the searchlight out almost
They do.
immediately,
Yeah. Yeah.
but at least we
They
know where they are. So
we
yeah,
know that they're here, you know.
yeah, right.
They get so close to the 3-inch gun that so fast that they can't use the 3-inch gun to
Press it.
shoot at the Japanese because they can't, as you said, depress the weapon. So they start cutting loose with 30s and 50s, and but they can't see anything. So they're literally shooting blind. McKinstry had 4 guys in that one position, and he realizes pretty quick, he's like, we're gonna die. So they pull out and they go back to a pre-established defensive line, which is, I don't know, 50, 60 yards inland, because again, Wilkes is not a big place.
Yeah,
And he forms a skirmish line, and the Japanese do reach that skirmish line pretty quickly. And when they do, McKinstry and these other Marines that are already there, they stop them cold.
yeah,
And they just kind of hold tight. The Japanese wind up holding tight there, and things start to spiral out of control on Wilkes for the Japanese.
right.
Because once the sun rises, Captain Platt, who we've talked about a pretty good amount, he's an aggressive dude. He's a Marine captain. He's ready to rock and roll. He's not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, yeah. So what ends up happening is actually that Platt ends up counterattacking in small groups. He's got himself, 6 Marines and 2 civilians that are draped in 30 cal ammo bandoliers. They look like Pancho Villa and his sort
Right.
of guys. And yeah, what ends up happening is that they take his 8 man. He's got another 14 man section that's in a 130-foot long line, and they start doing your standard, fire and maneuver sort of gambit, where you've got one section laying down automatic weapons fire to cover the movement of another section, and they keep inching forward. And in the process of doing that, they begin encountering groups of Japanese, and they begin wiping them out.
Yeah. Yeah. They begin tearing them up. And I love this is that Platt is walking, he's at the front of the column or the front of the line, and he's got a 1911 in each hand. Like like Jesse James, just
Get
walking
some.
down and just bam, bam. I
Right.
mean, just dropping guys. This is a bad dude, man.
Yeah,
He they wind up getting close enough to the Japanese around a 3-inch gun, like not far from where they landed, and McKinstry and his people pulled out, that the Japanese never saw him coming, and they had turned towards, and I can show a map, I will show a map. They had turned with their backs towards the beach, and just so happens from the direction where Platt was coming. So they didn't see them until Platt and his people were on top of them practically. They start shooting up into the bushes, and the Marines start shooting up into the bushes. And then there's one gentleman, Corporal Johnson, who is hand carrying a water cooled 1917 machine gun, which is not a light weapon,
weapon.
firing that damn thing from the hip, shooting into the bushes, and whenever he hears a scream, he just
Shoot more.
he just dumps more bells. He runs into, or as they're pushing forward ever so quickly, actually, the advance is relatively fast. Johnson runs into a bunch of Japanese that are huddled near the 3-inch gun. A bunch of guys are underneath one of the American trucks, 20 of them, as a matter of fact. And Johnson just starts, he calls it a machine gunner's dream. He just starts working from the front of the truck to the back, and he
Just
dumps
murders these
what,
guys.
4 belts of 30 cal into these 20 guys underneath this truck,
Yeah,
and kills 18 and seriously wounds the other 2 all
right.
by himself. Um, it
Yeah,
just
yeah,
waylay these Japanese here.
yeah. And so the bottom line is that as a result of these counterattacks by the various American groups, we basically clear Wilkes
Yes.
Island of resistance. And so by 0740, the Japanese on Wilkes had been exterminated by these counterattacks, and
Hmm.
98 Japanese are dead on Wilkes Island alone, defeated by a force of roughly 40 Marines and civilians attacking together in groups and exercising sound infantry tactics against them.
Yeah.
There just weren't a lot of places to hide in the sand dunes and the grass is kind of what it comes down to. So
One of the things that I found in looking at some of the personal accounts for this is that a lot of the Japanese, when they came under fire, especially from behind, a lot of the Marines who survived, of which there were only they took seven Marines took seven casualties, seven killed in action in this
Seven
fight.
killed. Yep.
They said that the Japanese just froze, like they just froze, and
Yeah.
they didn't clearly didn't expect an attack from the rear. Number one, and number two, when it happened, they just kind of, like a deer in headlights, they just stopped, and
Right.
the Marines would just, oh, if you're going
I'm
to stop, I'm going to kill you, and they
gonna
just kept
murder you.
rolling. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Which does not say good things about the professionality of the Second
no,
Maizuru SNLF force.
not at all.
Which again, when we tend to sometimes to refer to the NSNLF as Japanese Marines, they kind of weren't. I mean, the
No,
quality of these units was extremely variable. There are occasions when they do put in a very good performance, but this unit is just not performing very well at all.
no.
I don't know what's going on here. There's a lack of command and control on the Japanese side, or what? Maybe some of their officers got killed, and it's just privates that are roaming around, and these guys don't know what to do. I don't know, but this is not a very good performance. Just again in terms of basic infantry tactics on the part of the Japanese on Wilkes Island.
By 3:30 that afternoon, there are no live Japanese on Wilkes Island.
Yeah,
Platt and his people have completely, as you said, cleared the place because after
wiped them
they
out.
kill all these dudes that are by the 3-inch gun in the truck, they, obviously make sure everybody's dead, and then they Platt sends out patrols to scour the island to make sure they haven't landed over here or over there because they
Yeah,
don't know, and they find nothing. And when they do find, a handful here or there, they kill them. So there is nobody wearing a
yeah,
Japanese uniform that is, well, there are two that are wounded, they take them prisoner, but there's nobody that's going to harm the Americans on Wilkes Island that is breathing air at this
yeah,
moment. The Marines kill all of them.
yeah.
However, there is another landing, as we know. You alluded to that a
Bigger
little bit,
landing.
big time. Patrol
Yeah,
boats 32 and 33 quite literally crash ashore on Wake Island not long after the fighting on Wilkes begins. It's maybe 10, 15 minutes after, if that. Um, Same thing on Wake. The Marines can't see Jack because it's so
plot.
dark.
But you can
Um,
certainly hear it when a ship
yes, you can.
beaches itself a
Yes,
couple hundred. Yeah, it's funny that makes a noise. And so, yeah, it is the noise of those two patrol boats grounding themselves that alerts the Marine defenders to their presence. And one of these ships lands almost directly in front of Lieutenant Robert Hanna's 550 caliber guns and the 22 surviving members of VMF 211. Just that number right there, 550 calibers, man. That is
that's a
nothing.
load of ass whipping right
That
there.
is
It's
that
what that
is there.
is.
Yes, indeed.
Phew.
They got a handful of civilians, a few sailors from the Naval Air Station. Devereaux had given Hanna 10 more Marines, six civilians, and 40 1917s to add to his defense. And nearby, he's got a single 3-inch gun pointed towards the beach. Doesn't have sighting equipment, but even if you're firing over open sights against a beached warship, a multi-hundred-foot long warship, you can actually hit that sucker. And yeah, that's kind of what they start to do.
That is precisely what they do. When he sees or realizes that the Japanese have landed via these crash boats. Oh, and that's another thing. One of the guys on one of these Japanese, I forget which one it is, 32, patrol boat 32. When they crash ashore, some cat gets out and hangs a lantern on the bow of the ship.
Shoot me, shoot me.
Shoot me now. Shoot me now. And that is precisely what Hannah does. He goes over to the 3-inch gun with a crew of two civilians, and they just start pumping rounds into this thing.
Yep,
Um, he has the civilians alternate shooting and loading, and he's, watching with a pair of binocs and adjusting fire. First shot goes right over the boat, but the second one and the remaining 21 shots are dead on. He shoots, I think, 30 times and hits it an estimated 21 times in
ouch.
all of maybe 5 minutes. I mean, they're just pumping rounds into this thing. At some point, they hit some sort of either fuel storage or ammunition storage or something on this patrol boat, and this thing goes kaboom.
Yep.
And when it does, of course, the resulting fire that happens also ignite or illuminates rather the other
Yep.
patrol boat that's down the beach, and it
Right.
too comes under fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So now they're going to go ahead and start pumping rounds into that second boat. This is Patrol Boat 33. And so not only is this patrol boat under fire from this 3 inch, but of course they're using all the 50 cals, which a 50 cal, um, a 50 caliber machine gun will take apart a wooden house. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
big, heavy slug. And as the Japanese are going to discover at places like the Battle of Bismarck Sea, man, 50 cal will also puncture relatively thin steel for a ship. You can probably get rounds through the hulls of these patrol boats, would be my guess. And so the result is that both patrol boats 32 and 33 are basically turned into a meat grinder for the Japanese. Um, and so the survivors from that are on the beach and moving forward, but very gingerly, obviously, because they need to be keeping their heads down because they're under heavy automatic weapons fire at this point. So at this point, Devereaux now orders VMF 211's Major Putnam to go ahead and take his men, and who are now actually acting as infantry, and reinforce Hanna's position. And so Putnam, with a large group of civilians, moves out. The Japanese, likewise, now having larger numbers, are beginning to advance under this Marine fire. But because of that advantage in numbers, they also have the ability then to try to flank Hanna, which is this classic Japanese tactics. Fix your opponent in place with a frontal assault and then work an attachment around one of the flanks and give it to them, which is going to lead to then hand-to-hand combat between the
Mhm.
Japanese and some of these men under Putnam's command.
Yeah. And, like the Marines are fighting off every attack.
Yep.
They do. They stop everyone that comes at them with heavy casualties on the Japanese side. But like I put in the notes, with each attack, they're expending ammunition, a lot
Yep.
of it. And
Yep.
that ammunition, because I mean, the automatic weapons that these people had, that the Marines had, was, exorbitant. And they're not probably practicing very good fire
Fire
discipline at this,
discipline.
yeah, at this point in time. And I
Yeah.
can't really say as I blame them, but the ammunition's starting to run low, and that's going to be a major problem very soon. That fight at the airfield or near the airfield rages for 90 minutes
Hmm.
without stopping.
Yep.
Or if there's a pause, it's a minute or two. And each time, even though the Marines do fend them off, the Japanese get a little bit closer and a
Yep.
little bit closer and a little bit closer. And once they get too close for comfort, the Marines do pull back. To the western edge of the airfield. Lieutenant Cleaver is a guy we did not talk about last week, but he is credited with sinking a Japanese submarine. He doesn't. He
Mm.
hits it. He hits it, but it winds up sinking as a result of a collision, not because of Cleaver. But regardless of this, he is also in this fight right here, fighting for close range, at close range with the Japanese for over an hour. At the other end of the American line, a gentleman named Lieutenant Poindexter. He comes under rifle, grenade, and mortar fire, as you said earlier, neither of which the Marines have. There is
Yeah,
no
exactly.
artillery
My
at all.
guess is that they're taking fire from these little 50 millimeter grenade projectors that the Japanese love to use. I forget, it's
Knee
a Type
mortars is what they're
92, or
called. Yeah.
yeah, we call them knee mortars. They were nothing of the sort, but it's a very handy little weapon. And the ability for the Japanese to put down indirect fire on our lines, and we cannot respond with either 60 or 80, 81
Yeah.
millimeter mortars, means that we got a problem here. And the result is that even though Poindexter is able to hold his position, he eventually is going to be obliged to fall back, just because, again, he's under indirect fire that he cannot respond to. So
Right.
um, he pulls out about 55 guys and begins bringing them back.
He brings them back all the way to Camp One, which is a fair amount of distance from where he was.
Right.
And they set up a defensive line out there because, he's not running away. He's just setting up to a more holdable position. And he holds this position for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the Japanese don't come. And Poindexter is much like Platt, he's very aggressive and he realizes, well, hell's fire. If they're not coming, well, let's go to them. And
Let's
that's
go get them.
exactly what he does. He takes those
Yeah.
55 cats that he pulled out of there and he says, everybody grab a rifle and let's move. He says, and I quote, if we were to fight to the last man, we might as well die on the attack. Let's move. It's a man right there.
Yeah.
He divides his Marines, 55 guys, into roughly three squads, and they move right down the damn road, parallel to the beach. And their advance is significantly slower than Platt's was, mainly because they start running into some really dense underbrush, and that just
Hmm.
slows them down. They do take fire, and of course, they have to eliminate said fire when they take fire. And it's taking them, excuse me, a very long time to get where they want to be, but they're making progress.
Yeah.
And they wind up getting to a point where they do stop because Poindexter can see at this the same time a large pack of Japanese heading down the main road towards him, waving a white flag. And at this point, he's like, maybe, maybe we've won the day. So he
Right.
orders his men to halt, walks out in the middle of the road, grabs his 1903 Springfield with one hand, and just stands there and waits on these dudes to come to him. That's a
Right.
bad man.
Once
Let's,
again,
yeah, go
just
ahead.
the impressive thing here is the aggressiveness of the Marine defense. And
Yeah.
fast forwarding again, one of the things that you see at the Battle of Alligator Creek, likewise on Guadalcanal, is that the Marines are never content to just sit back passively on the defensive, that
Right.
they are always looking for an opportunity to counterattack if at all possible. They're very aggressive, small unit tacticians, and that is going to pay tremendous dividends down the road for us. Again, the contrast in that sort of behavior to some of the things that you see happening in the Battle of Malaya when we start talking about that, which is, I hate to say it, a much more passive defense on the part of the British. We just don't see that here with the Marines. These guys are pretty, steely eyed. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. They're born to
Unfortunately,
fight.
they're also massively outnumbered. So,
Tremendously outnumbered, unfortunately.
yeah.
The guy we mentioned before, Lieutenant Hanna, Robert
Yep.
Hanna, he's still holding his 3-inch gun position despite being attacked God knows how many times. Um, the last one of the last attacks kicks off 20 yards away from Hanna's position, but the Marine fire and civilians who are now, right up there with the Marines
Intermingled. Yeah.
cut these guys down, stop that advance half the distance. So now they're only 10 yards away from Hannah's position. He realizes at that point, he's like, we can't hold this. We're only, these guys are 10 yards away for crying out loud. We got to get the hell out of here. He orders everybody back. Um, Hannah and a bunch of his guys, however, decide they're going to stay. They huddle near the 3-inch gun and he tells them, quote, we'll make our stand here. This is as far as we go. So in other words, we're going to die here. We're
Yeah.
not going to move. And at that point, the Japanese start to close in. They typical, I hate to say it like this, but typical Japanese infantry tactics, they don't care about the enemy fire. They're running right at it. And I think it's at this point where the Japanese have probably had enough
Yep.
of dealing with Robert Hanna and this 3-inch gun and these Marines and the civilians. So they just run headlong into this fire right here.
Yeah. Exactly. And at this point, too, the this group of Americans is now essentially out of ammunition.
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, the end is now here. John Sorensen is a civilian, and he is next to Elrod. He runs out of ammunition and starts throwing rocks. Standing up, he is immediately cut down by Japanese fire. Elrod at this point stands up and yells, "Kill the sons of bitches!" and is firing from his hip with his Tommy gun. Um, but yeah, they're out of ammunition once he goes through that box, and that's pretty much the end. And at
Yeah.
this point, this entire group is cut down by Japanese fire.
It's one of those Hollywood scenes, where you think, the Marine stands up with the Thompson firing from the hip, kill the sons of bitches and wading into the fire. And one could imagine that it probably would be if it weren't for the fact that the Japanese remarked after the battle that there was a very large American, and Elrod was a big boy, with
Uh-huh.
a Thompson submachine gun firing from the hip, advancing into the Japanese fire. Was it Elrod? Probably so, frankly, is
Probably so.
from all accounts, is that it was more than likely was Henry Elrod wailing his Thompson from the hip, rolling into Japanese fire, and then, running out of ammo and flinging grenades
Grenades
all over the place. Um,
until they
and of
finally cut
course,
him down.
yeah, that's when they kill him. That fight around the 3-inch gun lasts for 5.5 hours.
Wars.
5.5 hours for Hanna and his people around the 3-inch gun that the Japanese tried to dislodge these people. And Hanna at this point is down to 3 rounds in his 1911. Um, and he looks at one of his guys and he says, "Where's the cavalry now?"
Right.
And as we know, the cavalry is not coming because not long after the Japanese land, Cunningham sends a message to 14th Naval District, and it says, and it's famous, it says, "Enemy on island, issue in doubt."
In doubt.
And that has
Yeah.
a drastic effect on everything that happens after it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as soon as that message comes in to Pearl Harbor, it's one thing to move a relief mission in if the island is still being
Sure.
held by friendly forces. It's completely different if now you're basically looking at having to re-invade this island and do that in the face of Kitabutai and ground-based air power. That ain't happening. And so, whereas Pai just a few hours ago was relatively resolute in trying to run this rescue force in, now he is vacillating once again, and understandably so. But the bottom line is that he's not going to make this decision. It's going to be
Mhm.
made for him
Yeah.
back in Washington, D.C., by both Betty Stark and Ernest King, which on the face of it is a bit of an eye opener because, of course, we always think of King as being a real fire breather when it comes to his
Hmm.
level of aggression. But the bottom line now, in the opinion of both Stark and King, is that Wake is becoming a liability and that instead efforts should be made to reinforce Midway. And so at 0730 on the 23rd, Pi pulls the plug on the orders basically of Washington, D.C., that we're cutting our losses here, is kind of what it
Hmm.
comes down to.
Yeah. He Bottom line, they didn't know what the heck was waiting for them there. And,
Yeah,
a lot of people pin the decision to not go forward with the relief mission on Pi. But as you just said, it, the decision had been made for him.
yeah,
And it's key to understand too that both Stark and King were the ones that said, "We're done." This is before the Japanese land, or actually before they knew that the Japanese landed, but it's before they knew that the Japanese had landed. So even King and them, they were like, this is becoming a pain in the ass. And unfortunately, these guys are going to have to hang out to dry. Um, Pi apparently, from what I was able to decipher, had a conversation as to whether or not they should indeed continue with the mission because
right.
Fletcher was pretty close. He was, I don't know how many miles, but he wasn't that damn far.
Yeah,
And apparently his subordinates were about 50-50. It's like half of them were saying we should go, half of them saying we should come home. Um, the fate of the Saratoga is what ultimately hung over his head because Pi
yep,
knew that he was there really just to take care, to mind the store until the
right.
boss came in, and losing any one of those three flight decks would have been catastrophic for the U.S. Navy in the Pacific at that time. So he reluctantly does give the order. Apparently, Fletcher and Aubrey Fitch, who was also aboard Sarah at that time, they are not pleased at all,
Yeah, it's
to the
absolutely
point of
devastating.
like taking their caps down and throwing it on the deck, and a lot of
Yep,
cussing and a lot of
yeah,
bitching going on here.
yeah. This is a very unhappy moment. Yeah, and they're actually hoping that the sink back will, think better of it, and so they end up loitering around in this general vicinity to see if there are going to be any new orders, because of course Pi has been vacillating here for the last couple
Right.
of days, but yeah, nothing ended up coming over the wire as far as new orders, and so they at this point turn around Task Force 14 and they start heading home. So yeah, there is going to be no cavalry.
No cavalry at all.
Yep.
Um, and we talked about lack of communications on Wake, and this is where it really comes to bite them in the butt. Um, Cunningham and Devereaux, neither of them knew exactly what was going on
Right.
because the phone lines had been either cut by the Japanese or hit by shell fire or both or whatever. It didn't matter. As far as Devereaux knew, everybody on Wilkes was dead. And they
Right.
were, but they were wearing Japanese uniforms, not American. But he didn't know that.
Yeah.
He did not know that. All he heard was machine gun fire and rifle fire and grenades and whatever going off. And he just assumes like, well, these guys are probably smoked. They're gone.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that is the morning when the Japanese landed at night, in order to not be bombed by their own people, they set up these little flags all over the beach.
Yep.
And that's all Devereaux sees. He looks through binoculars. He sees no movement because Platt and his people they're hunkered down.
Yep.
And all he sees is these little Japanese flags all over God's creation. And he's like, well, clearly they've taken the island.
Yeah.
He did not. Yeah, they did
Wrong.
not.
Yeah.
So the
Meanwhile, his own ammunition situation is
yes,
dire. He's
yes,
running out
big
of
time,
stuff. Yeah.
big time.
So yeah. And likewise, from his vantage, Devereaux can look out there and there are 20 Japanese warships, loitering offshore, including a quartet of heavy cruisers. How are you gonna,
Yeah,
possibly fend off that force? At this point, your own force is seriously degraded and they're not coming close enough that you can use your 5-inch guns on them. So yeah. They have a little powwow, and Cunningham and Devereaux, they talk about surrender without actually ever using the word.
right.
But Devereaux finally tells Cunningham that you're the commander of this overall installation. I'm just the commander of the Naval Air Station here. It's your call to make. And Cunningham says, "Well, I guess we better give it to them then."
Yeah, Devereaux. There's it's interesting too. If you read some post-war accounts between Devereaux and Cunningham, you know, each one of them blamed the other one for
Mm,
waving the white flag. And exactly to your point, it's Cunningham's decision. He's
yeah,
he's he's the boss,
he is the
and
superior officer. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
Devereaux cannot say, "Hey, we're surrendering,
right.
Commander." Doesn't work like that. So, I
Yeah,
mean, bottom line is, whether whoever says what, at the end of the day, it's on Cunningham to surrender this force, and that's exactly what he does.
yes.
Devereaux is then, or Cunningham orders Devereaux to go out and make this
Pass
happen.
word and yeah,
He comes out, and he says to his runner, or several of them actually, pass the word, we're going to surrender.
right.
Um, one of these guys stands outside and just starts yelling, Major's orders, we're surrendering. And Devereaux apparently, like literally, he's crying and he starts screaming back at the runner. He says, it's not my orders, God damn it.
Right.
He had no intentions of surrendering. Apparently, seeing the anguish in the man's face, many of his Marines come up, pat him on the shoulder, shake his hand, and say, don't worry, Major. You fought the good fight. You did all you could, which is freaking heartbreaking, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Um, the word passes down the line to the Marines, who are still holding their positions, mind you, with the exception of
Yes.
two or three,
Yeah.
and they are flabbergasted because they're
Yep.
like, we just beat the hell out of these people, and now
Yeah.
we're having to give up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's shocked is the word.
Yeah. Not a happy situation. So when Hannah hears the news of this, he he takes the magazine out of his 1911 and throws it on the ground. He looks at Devereaux and says, "This can't be happening. Marines don't surrender." But they had, obviously. Next, they've got to get a hold of Poindexter, and he's the guy that has been standing on the road waiting for this group of
Yeah,
Japanese to. He was
to come
assuming,
to him.
yeah, he was assuming that the Japanese are going to be surrendering to him. As this happened, a Japanese climbed the water tower and ripped down the stars and stripes, and enraged Marines began running towards the tower. And at that point, Devereaux is obligated to say, "Hold it, keep your heads. Don't do anything stupid at this point." So the biggest surprise, of course, is going to be Wilkes Island.
Yeah,
So when they finally get out there, Devereaux boards a small boat with some Japanese. He motors over to be met by Captain Platt. As Devereaux approaches Platt's lines, he yells, "Lay down your arms. The island has been surrendered." Platt jumps up and yells, "Who the hell gave that order?"
From his viewpoint, you can understand.
Right,
These people just killed everybody on the damn island. They were
right.
firmly in control of that island.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nevertheless, um, yeah, that's the bottom line. Platt asks, Major, do you know what you're asking us to do? And Devereaux responds, yes, tell your men to lay down their weapons. It's an honorable act. Platt takes his 1911 and throws it onto the ground and stalks off.
Yeah.
So,
It,
not a happy
are
time.
not a happy time at all.
I get it, but the bottom line is that the final outcome on this fight the Japanese are going to win.
Right.
The Americans are running out of ammunition.
Yeah. That's the
And
key there.
that's the issue. And the Japanese at this point have the ability to reinforce effortlessly, and the Americans are, there's a finite number of bullets on this island that the Americans can shoot. It's clear that if the Japanese decide to take this place under heavy gunfire, they're just going to wallop it.
Right.
And they still have several hundred soldiers ashore at this point. So, as harsh as it is to say, um, what happens
It,
at the end of this fight if we don't surrender?
right.
You know,
It was inevitable, is
it
what
was
it is.
inevitable.
It was inevitable. They were going to either surrender the island or they were all going to be killed because,
Yep.
as you said, there's a couple hundred-ish live
More.
Japanese on Wake right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's 1,100 more sitting
Yep.
offshore. The Kajioka was ready to run in, quite literally, run in there
Hmm.
should the need arise. And frankly, if those couple hundred that are still alive on Wake get killed, that need would have arisen. And one
And
would
we
think that he
don't,
wouldn't have hesitated, but we
right.
don't know.
We don't know. This is one of the critiques I sort of lay at MacArthur's doorstep when he's infuriated by the Navy because the Navy won't run supplies into the Philippines. Why can't they just put stuff on transports? Like because the Japanese dominate the waters off of the Philippine archipelago. It's just absolutely ironclad. The same situation pertains here at Wake. The Japanese have now established ironclad air and sea supremacy off of this island. We can't reinforce it. We are going to run out of bodies and bullets at some point. And the potential result of not surrendering is that this Marine contingent is wiped out by the Japanese. And to what end? What military gain have you provided for the sacrifice of those lives, other than somewhere down the road, some American producer gets to make another movie about the Pacific Alamo where the entire garrison is wiped out. It's really not worth it. I hate to say it. Um, Maybe that goes
Well,
against semper fi, but that's my take.
as we're going to see, and I mean, and God, look, 100% straight right now, the defense of the island was nothing but heroic.
Absolutely.
And those guys kicked that ass, not once,
Very
but
competently.
twice.
Yeah.
But Wake becomes nothing for the remainder of the war. So,
Right.
and we can get into this in a second, but of course, Fletcher was supposed to get there on Christmas Eve. Well, the Japanese land on the 23rd, so
Right.
that wasn't going to happen anyway. But
Right.
just in an alternate universe, let's say the Japanese decide to land on the 26th, because in a way it said you have to have this island by the 26th.
Hmm.
If the Marines get there, I mean, if Fletcher gets there on Christmas Eve and everything unloads and they get the civilians the hell off the island, what are we going to use Wake for? Because we
Right.
don't use the Japanese don't use it for anything hardly, for the remainder of the war. Hell, they're still the same damn guys on there in 1945.
Right.
So
Yes.
it's
Which is an interesting point too, because we mentioned this in the first episode, that these SNLF units are very ad hoc. As soon as this SNLF group that captures Wake succeeds in capturing it, they immediately get turned into a base defense force. And
right.
again, that would never happen with the Marines,
Yeah.
US Marines. No, those are assault troops. We're going to use them for another, sort of assault down the road. We're going to bring in other people to garrison this stupid island. So that's another point of contrast here. Yeah, we're just not going to hold on to Wake. I don't think. And like I say, the addition of 200 new Marines but then subtracting 1,000 civilians that could keep those positions in repair and whatnot, I don't know. I just don't see us long term being able to hold on to Wake. If the Japanese want to take it, they're going to be able to take it
Yes,
again because they are able to exert
they have the
air
assets.
supremacy. Yeah,
Yeah, they
no,
have the
no can.
assets.
Right, they got the assets and we don't.
And if we do get the people ashore and they do, let's say they fend off another attack, well, it's
Right.
only a matter of time because
Yeah.
we don't have the naval assets either, by the way, to really do much of anything at all. So once
Yeah.
these guys, these 200 so Marines get ashore, that's it. That's probably all
Yeah.
they're going to send out there.
Yeah.
So it's,
So again, it is sort of a midway in reverse that, okay,
right.
congratulations, we still hold this island, but it is
Now
sitting
what?
under an enemy air envelope and we can't really reinforce it effectively. There's no fresh water. It's
No,
just, yeah. I
no,
suppose
it's a
we could have
hellhole.
run submarines in there with supplies. That would have been a possibility. But of course, the Japanese have got the ability to keep their own submarine force engaged and make sure that we cannot run in, ships like the Tangier or something like that on a regular basis. It's just this
Yeah.
is going to be a really, really tough place for us to hold. Is kind of what it comes down to. Yeah.
So Wake, as we said last week and again this week, the Japanese thought it was going to be a walkover. It most certainly was not a
Hmm.
walkover, and there's differing numbers here. And this goes back to a conversation you and
Vastly
I had
differing.
big time, like more than twice the numbers. John Wukovitz,
Yeah.
who's a fantastic historian, he
Yep.
estimates the Japanese dead to be, and he just gives a ballpark because he doesn't know exactly. He estimates them to be over 1,000, and
Right.
that includes
The
the human
destroyers.
losses on the two destroyers that were sunk on the 11th.
I
He
buy that.
ballparks, yeah, yeah, he ballparks about 500-ish killed on the 23rd of December,
Right.
which is a lot of guys killed. Now,
Hmm.
Rich, who's our mutual good buddy, who may or may not watch this episode,
Yep.
says 39 Japanese are killed in the air, 111 are killed ashore, and 394 at sea. I don't doubt the 394 at sea at all because we
Hmm.
already talked about the destroyers and everything else.
Yep.
But there's over 98 Japanese bodies counted on Wilkes
Wilkes alone.
alone.
Yeah.
And that's just Wilkes. And we
Right.
know that Hanna and Elrod and Poindexter and all those guys waylay the Japanese on Wake as well.
Yeah.
So whether 500 is the right number or not, I don't know. But this goes
Paul
into the,
Paul Dull, from his battle history of the Imperial Japanese Navy, I believe lists 140 SNL law and SNLF lost. And the word lost there is ambiguous. Is that killed? Is that killed missing? Is that
yeah,
killed missing wounded? It's unspecified. I would like to see the Japanese sources is kind of what it comes down to. And unfortunately, don't have the Senshi social volume on this particular fight and yeah, didn't have a chance to even run my phone over it. The numbers are really, really squishy as to how many the Japanese lost. I agree with you that 111 ashore, 100 and
mhm,
even 140 ashore feels light to
very
me.
light. Feels
Yeah,
very light. I mean, just from the fact that, damn near 100 of them are killed on Wilkes alone. And that's not
right,
just Marines counting that, by the way. That's a Japanese counting that as well.
right.
So the number's got to be, I say it's north of 250, but I don't, heck,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Particularly given the fact that, one of the patrol boats explodes in the
Yes,
the course of unloading troops. Yeah, this feels
very
multiple
light.
hundreds. Yeah,
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, I
Anyway,
100% agree. The one
yeah.
thing that is known are American casualties. There's 124 Americans are killed in this fight, 49 military, most of them are Marines, some sailors are included in that, and 75 civilians. Most of the civilians are actually killed in the bombing attacks.
Hmm.
And there are some killed in combat for sure, Sorensen being one.
Yeah,
VMF 211, the Chamorros and the contractors suffered the highest casualty percentage
right.
of the Americans on the island itself. Um, I found this pretty interesting. Of course, Japanese post actions say, Wake was easily captured. Da, 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 da. Well, there was a Japanese journalist in with the wave of Japanese who landed right in front of Hannah's 3-inch gun. And he wrote that there were mountains of dead and rivers of blood, and the fight for Wake was one which would have made the gods weep.
That doesn't sound like a walkover.
No, it does
No,
not. Not at
no,
all. So, before we wrap it up, overall effects on the Japanese offensive plan for early 1942. What does Wake do, if anything at all?
nothing,
Nothing at all.
nothing. Yeah, again, if I look at the just sort of the grand strategic situation, again, this offensive is all aimed at the South.
Hmm.
Really it all comes down to how quickly can we capture Indonesia and grab the oil that's in Sumatra. That's really what it all comes down to. So the fact that Yay team, the Marines held on to Wake Island for 2 weeks longer than their three than the Japanese thought they were going to hang on to it has no material impact whatsoever on the course of events down south in places like Indonesia. It just doesn't matter. I hate to say
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So
And the expenditure of Japanese manpower, ammunition has no bearing on anything because after this, those guys, as we said, they stay there. And then the
yeah,
Japanese naval forces, as you said earlier, they live to fight another day,
yeah.
and most notably in the Solomons.
Hmm.
But bottom line is that it was a place that, could never be held, no matter how much heroism is abound on
Yeah,
Wake
and,
Island.
and and that needs to be parsed very carefully because I think you can say again in the short term, okay, another 200 Marines, man, they might have won that fight on Wake Island on the 23rd just
Sure,
outright, just
sure.
defeated the Japanese. But in the long term, this
That's the
island,
key.
yeah, that's the key. Um, yeah, it is sort of depressing because the aggressive part of you is like, you know, we damn near won this fight with another couple hundred. We could have held on to this place. But again, to what end? To what
Yeah,
military end? Does this then become a sump for American power trying to hold on to an atoll that at the end of the day really is fairly useless militarily? And that's how we started this whole episode. You'll recall, when the Spaniards found this place, is like,
right.
this place is useless. And you're sort of back to that evaluation of it from a military standpoint here at the end of this episode.
You wonder, when Nimitz comes in, because he comes in not long after all this goes down.
Yeah, like 4 days,
He comes in and that's one of the first things he gets word of is, oh, hey, by the
two
way,
days.
we're, Pye's not Pye, Fletcher's force is coming back, and Nimitz
Yeah,
just kind of rolls his eyes. But if we do land people on there again, and if we hold off this, does Nimitz commit men and material to keep going in there? Or does he commit and just enough people to get him the hell out of there? That's a question that we'd never know the answer to, but
yeah.
I'd like to think that he would not commit men to hold a place that is, you know,
He was a very calculating dude, and and you see that in his battle planning for Midway too. That he issues explicit instructions to his carrier commanders that yeah, we're not going to do a do or die fight for Midway because at the end of the day, the carriers are more valuable than the island.
mhm,
A of all, I think that my Marines can hold that island regardless, and B, even if they can't, the Japanese will never be able to keep it in supply for
much like
all of the
us,
same,
like
much
Wake.
like us. So yeah, if I were a betting man, I would bet that Nimitz would try to do a relief mission to pull the Marines out and just
Agreed.
bring them. I'd plunk them down on Midway or whatever, put them on places that are more important to defend.
Yeah,
um, yeah, that's my guess.
I
We will
would
never
agree as
know.
well. We'll never know.
Yeah,
All right. Well, that
excellent.
that wraps this long episode.
Puppy up.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
Cool. All right. Well,
Let's
with that,
let
we
our
want to go ahead.
let our listeners off the hook.
Yeah. Y'all go get a coffee and
Yeah,
hit the head
get
because we're
ahead.
about to do the same. So, with that, we want to thank you very much for listening and or watching this episode of the Unauthorized History of Pacific War podcast. Give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. As of today, well, a couple days, the Q&A session send-in is over. We're
Yep.
going to be scheduling that hopefully in the near future, and we'll let everybody know when that happens, but
When I
it'll
get
happen.
back from Japan and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Probably be end of October or sometime, but
Yeah.
you guys will know. So anyway, all
I
right.
and I don't when is this planning to come out? What date do you think?
Heck if I know.
Okay. I will just say one last, I'm going to be down in Texas at the Audie Murphy World War II
Oh, that's
Roundtable on
right.
the 23rd of October. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that'll make the air by date or not, but we'll
I
see.
don't know either. Frankly, I'd have to look. I don't know. It might. It might. But if it does and you're able, go see John.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. So my name is Seth Paridon. I want to thank you very much for listening in or watching, John, my friend. Thank you as
Yep.
always.
John Parshall, thanks so much for tuning in as always, and we will see you again next week.